Hey there, it's Graciela here. Some years ago, we shared a video about converting CSV files into Excel format using a combination of Office scripts and Power Automate. We went to the Excel interface and wrote some code that helped us converting the CSV into an actual Excel format. There are many ways in which this use case can be solved. So today we're going to be sharing a different approach from what we shared some years ago. One of the main differences from that video, apart from the audio quality hopefully, is that in this scenario we're going to be leveraging the Graph API to convert the CSV into an Excel format. And I think it's an easier approach because we don't have to write the code in the Office script. However, the connector we're going to be using is a premium connector, so you will need either a trial or a Power Automate license to be able to run this in the long term. But let's get started just having a quick look at the example of a CSV file that we're going to be working with. So this is the file. We have only 4 columns, and of course we don't know how many rows we're going to get. That can range between a couple of hundreds and 1,000. So we're going to convert this into an Excel format with a table and all of that. So we're going to format this into an actual file with a table. So the first thing that we need to do is to create a template in which that's the example all the files are going to look. So for me, I'm going to be placing everything in this folder. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a new folder, and I'm just going to call it template. Inside this template, I'm going to just create an Excel workbook that is going to have the very same columns that we would regularly have in the final Excel file that we want to have. So let's go ahead and insert a table. And the first, let's open again the CSV file, and the first column is product. Then we have category, quantity, and warehouse. So let's just name the columns however we want them to show in the final formatted Excel file. So quantity would go here. This is category, and then the from is the warehouse. So now we have this very quick template. Let's just rename our table to inventory table. And now that we have this template, let's just assign a name to it. Let's call it template for now. And how we want to convert the files is that we just want to upload the files here directly into the SharePoint folder. Then we want Power Automate to capture all the files that are uploaded and immediately convert it into the template that we just saw. So for that, let's just go ahead and open the Power Automate portal, and let's go to My Flows, and then let's start an automated cloud flow. The trigger will depend on the type of process we're working with. In this scenario, we just want to know whenever there's a new file in this specific folder, and that's going to be the event that will start our flow. This could be an email or anything else depending on the process that this is going to follow. So let's assign a name to our flow. And let's select our trigger. So let's do when a file is created, and then we're going to select which is the folder under which we want to be listening to the new files that are created. Once we have the trigger, the first thing we need to do is to select the SharePoint address. Then what's the library? In our case, it's documents. And then we want to filter this or limit this automation to just the folder that we have designated for this process, which is under shared documents, and then CSV to XLS. Okay, now we have the trigger, and pretty much what we're gonna do with this workflow is extract the content of the CSV file. Then we're gonna make a copy of this template. We're going to convert the CSV into a format that we can use. And finally, we're going to insert the rows using the Graph API. So let's get started by getting the content of the file that was just uploaded into SharePoint. So for that, we're gonna be using the SharePoint connector because we want to get the file content. So get file content. It's here. And as always, the first thing we do is to select the SharePoint site, and then it's going to ask us which is the file that we want to get the content for. In this case, this is going to be a dynamic file because in this case, we're working with this CSV1 and CSV2, but we don't know which file is going to be. So for that, what we need to do is to just select the field for the file selector, and then select the this icon to be able to select the file identifier. So we just need to hit here in the search for the dynamic content and just make sure to select the identifier. Then what we are going to do is we are just going to a compose action here, and we are just going to go ahead and print the file content. For now, I'm going to test it so we make sure that it's recognizing the files. So let's go ahead and add our first file just to test. So first, let's test. So this is listening on our folder. Let's add the first CSV, and it should start anytime soon. Okay, here it is. So we're getting the file here. We see what are the outputs. And here we see that we are getting the file content, and this is a CSV file, but we're still getting this in base 64 format. So we need to make sure to convert this into actual text so we can actually format the CSV into a format that the Excel connector will accept. So now we have here the content, and let's go ahead and edit. And we are just going to use this compose. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste it into a notepad. And what we need to do is to just grab what's the parameter name. In this case, we are only interested in the content and not the whole thing. You can see that when we select the content of the file, it's getting the whole thing, both the content type and the content. So what we need to do to extract just the content is add a question mark, and then in between square brackets and then single quotes, we just need to add the parameter name that we want. This is a standard behavior for Power Automate, and this is always the way in which we're going to get the parameter name or an attribute name from a JSON response. So now that we have that, we're pretty much going to just get this text. So on top of this, what we need to do is to convert this into string. So if I copy this and open the expression editor, I will remove the curly brackets in this. And if I look for the base 64 keyword, I see that there are a few items I could use. In this case, we want to convert this base 64 into string. So that's the one we're going to use. So I will open parentheses and just close it at the end. And then let's hit on add. Then let's save. And we're going to rerun the automation just to make sure that it actually works. So let's resubmit. And let's open this. And if I open here if I click there in download, we see that we are getting a lot of text that is separated by a break line. As you can see here, this is separated by a break line. This means that each of these is a new line. Every time we see the /n, that means we have a new line in the file. So we can see that we successfully converted the file into a text that we can now format into what we want. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to call this CSV content. And then let's add a new action here. And in this case, what we want to do for now, we're going to do a compose so we can understand what we're doing. Let's add a new compose. And here I will just select the result from the CSV content. And what I'm going to do, as we saw there, this is a lot of text. This is really only text separated by separators. So in this case, the split or the separator keyword is the break line. So what we need to do is to just split that text into different lines. So if I do this and I copy this text and I paste it here, let's hit on save. And then let's resubmit again. And we'll see how that looks once it runs. Okay, so here we had just a lot of text. And here now this is split into, you can see that this is now different rows. So initially we just have a bunch of text. that was joined by this separator, which was the break line. Now we have actual lines. The next thing we need to do is to convert this into the different columns that we are going to map these to. So we have 4 columns and we want to map these 4 to 4 different columns. And the way we're going to do it is based on this blog by Matthew Devani that is really helpful, that help us understand how we can upload multiple rows into an Excel file and do it pretty quickly. We can see that there is an example here on how to move data from SharePoint to Excel. In our case, we're converting CSV to Excel, which is a similar concept, but not exactly the same. But what it's shown in this blog is really helpful because it gives you the exact format that we need to upload the data to. So in this case, we can see that the SharePoint data is being converted into this format. So that means that for every row that we have in our file, we need to have a square bracket, and then the data for the first column, data for the, well, a comma, then a comma, and then data for the third column, comma, and data for the fourth column. And then we close that array, and then we start a new one. That's the first row. Then we have a second row, and then the third row, and so on. So this is the format that we need. Each of the rows that we are going to enter into our Excel file needs to go in this format. So for the sake of our example, if I open this, let's open this compose again, and let's work with just the first 2 rows. So in this case, what we need to do is to convert this text, which for now we only have in 1 row. We want to put this here, and then books here, and then 252, and then El Salvador. And then same with the other one. We're gonna put this here, and then games here, and then 142, and then just the country name, and so on. So this is pretty much how we want to how we want to format how the data is looking now. We're gonna format it in the very similar way to what Matthew is showing here. So for that, we are going to be using an action that is called select. This select action is pretty useful because we can use it for a lot of things, mainly for converting arrays, converting JSON objects and many things, or JSON objects inside arrays, and doing many things. So in this case, what we want to do is to convert this into this format. So for that, we're not really going to be using this compose. We just added it so we could see the result, but what we're gonna do is we're gonna copy this code and paste it directly here. That way Power Automate will know that it has to execute this for all the rows that we see here. Now, just like we did a split by the break lines, we can also do a split by the separator that we're using. In this case, we're using a comma. If your file has a different type of separator, then in that case, we're gonna use that separator. So in this case, it's a very similar thing. We're just going to split the content of each line by a comma. So we do that in Power Automate by using the expression item. So if I write item, that just means the current row. And that's what we're going to be using. So what we want to do is just split the current row by a comma and then close parentheses. And with this expression, we're just asking Power Automate to convert this every single line that we have here and convert it into the format that we need. For that, we need to click on this T to switch to text mode, and then open the expression editor and add the expression. So let's hit on add, and now let's hit on save. And we're gonna see the results of that in a moment. Okay, let's resubmit. Okay, and here it is. If I show the outputs, then we see that this is the actual format that we want. Probably the only thing that we don't need is the first row because we already have the first row in the template. So for that, the only thing that we need to do is to just pretty much skip the first row. So from the CSV content, we are going to use the function skip, and we are going to skip 1 row. So let's copy this and then paste it. And then we are going to remove this compose, and we're going to call this select CSV. So let's save. And the next part, now that we have formatted our Excel file or better said, our CSV file into the format that Excel needs, now we need to make a copy of the template that we already have in place here. So we need to make a copy to insert the data in a copy of this file. We want to keep the template empty so it's ready for new files. So for that, let's just use the get file content. I'm gonna do this time get file content using path because it's always going to be the same file. So in this case, it's a template. So first thing we're gonna do, select the SharePoint address, and then let's go ahead and select the file path. In this case, we are totally safe by using this, by selecting manually the file, because the template is going to stay as a template. It's always going to be the same file. Then once we have the get file content, we're gonna create a file. We could have also used the create a copy of that one if we would like to, but in this case, it's better to use the create file so we can decide the name. But in this case, we're gonna use the create file. So let's create the file here in the CSV to XLS. And then I'm just going to put the name as the GUID, as a GUO ID. So we're just going to add that. What this is going to do is to just add a random set of numbers and characters that we can use to just assign the name. And then let's do .xlsx. And then the content of the file is going to be what we have in the previous, from the previous content, which is always going to be the template. So for now, let's save. And what we're gonna do here is just extract the content of the file. And if we have a look at Matthew's blog, we see that what he shows in here is that we use the Graph API to insert the data into the Excel file. And here we can see that the drive ID and the item ID are needed. Normally, this is not something that comes available in the create file action. If I resubmit this, and if we check the outputs from the create file, unfortunately, it's not something that we can get from there. However, we can list the rows in Excel, and that action will give us back the information that we need, which is what Matthew has listed here as the drive ID and the item ID. So if I open the create file and see the outputs, we really don't have this information available. We don't have the drive ID or the item ID, so we need to go ahead and add a new action to list the rows present in a table. So let's do list rows from Excel here, and again, the first thing we're always going to do is to select the SharePoint site, then the document library, which is documents, and then we are going to select the file. But here we know it's a dynamic file because we want to get the item ID and the drive from the file we just created, because there is where we want to insert the data. So in this case, we need to use the dynamic content icon and just bring the file identifier, which is the one that we have here. And then in the table, since we are using dynamic content, it's not recognizing that we have a table there, but we just can go ahead and check the name that we have for the template, because this is a template, so the file structure will remain the same. The table will always have this name. So we can safely put it here. And we're gonna rename this to get file metadata, and then let's hit on save again. And now we are going to test the flow just to be able to see the data here. And let's download this file and upload it again. And for now, let's remove these Excel documents. And let's just wait for the flow to start. Okay, so it's running. And let's, I will go back to edit on this one and have my executions on a different tab. And yeah, I just realized this is going to create a loop because new files are created. So probably what we want to do is to create a different folder where we're going to be placing the files, because we can see that it just keeps executing because we are creating a new file here. Or the other thing that we could do is to add a trigger condition. So the file name is only CSV. So let's do that before we continue. So let's add a compose here. And then let's bring the file name with extension. Let's copy this, and we are going to use contains CSV. Then let's remove the curly bracket and this one, and then let's copy and add it here as a trigger condition, and this way only files containing CSV will trigger this flow. And let's quickly go back just to see if it kept executing. So yeah, it should stop doing that in a moment. So for now, let's open the latest file. The latest execution. And then here we can see that the file was created. And here in the, this is the list rows present in a table, but we're renaming it because we are not really wanting to list. We just want to get the get file metadata. And here, if I click on the outputs, I see that we have this attribute that is called OData context. So let's copy this, paste it here. And here we can see that we have the item ID, which is files here. And here we have the drive ID. However, we could also extract the drive ID from the inputs, as Matthew suggests in the blog. Matthew also suggests that we could also use the file from here, but unfortunately, this is not the right ID that SharePoint and Excel need, so we cannot use this one. So we can get the drive from the inputs and get the item ID from the outputs. So now that we have all of this, the next thing we're going to do is we are going to add a compose action for the drive ID, which is the first thing that we have. So drive ID. And in this case, I'm just going to copy Matthew's code because we already have it here. We pretty much get the information from inputs, parameters, and drive. So if I copy this and paste it into my notepad, we're gonna see that we just need to get the information from the get file metadata. So if I put that, here we have the, it's directly pointing to the outputs, so we cannot use this code, but we can replace this, for example, for actions, and then get file metadata, and then just use this. We're gonna be using the inputs, the parameters, and then the drive. So let's paste this here, copy this, and just paste it here. And for the item ID, we're gonna be adding another compose. Let's rename to item ID. And for the item ID, we're going to be using, again, the information that comes from the get file metadata. In this case, we're gonna be using the outputs, so we can totally leave it like this because this is what we're going to be using. However, you can see here, it's mapping to the value attribute, which is this one. And what we need is the OData context. So we're gonna copy this and replace it by value. This way we know we are going to be getting this link that we have here. And what we need is exactly what is between files and tables. So for that, we can split this information. So for example, if we split by the word files, we're gonna get two things. We're gonna get whatever is before files and what is second or what is next after the word files. So let's go ahead and do a split here by the keyword files. Let's close parentheses, and then we want to get what is at the end. So in this case, the right side. So in this case, we're gonna do last. So we want to extract the last one. And finally, we also want to get what is before tables. So we're gonna get this, and we're going to do another split here, and we are going to get the first item. So next, what we're gonna do, we're going to replace both the parentheses and the single quotes, and for that, we can use the replace function. In this case, we are going to replace the single quotes by nothing, and we can do that by writing 4 single quotes. That means that that's what we want to replace. We want to replace a single quote by nothing. And then finally, we also want to replace the parentheses, the opening one and the closing one. And that's the function we are going to add here in the item ID. If it becomes difficult to read the formulas, what I usually do is I look for an Excel formula formatter online. And then, for example, if we paste what we had there, we can see that, well, I will remove the curly brackets and the add. And you can see here that it looks a lot better visually. The future me will thank me for formatting this and make it clearer than just a bunch of text. So now we have the formula here, and then we can save. If we go back, now we can see that the infinite loop actually stopped, so we're good. And now we are ready to use the action to add the rows in Excel file. So for that, let's look for the HTTP pre-authorized action, which is the one that we have here. Make sure that you select the one that says pre-authorized, and then let's click on invoke an HTTP request. And here we can see that it has the premium icon. So the premium icon will make the workflow premium and require a license in the long term. So here we're just going to follow Matthew's example, which is using, well, this time it didn't ask me to start a new connection because I already had it. But if you get a new connection, let's just add a new one. And then, and here in the resource URL, we're going to write this, and the base resource, we're also going to write graph.microsoft.com. And I'm going to leave a link to Matthew's blog and also to a link for all this text and code that we used in the description of the video, so you can have it if you would like it. And then we just click on sign in. It will ask us to sign in once, and then the connection will be created. And then we can follow the next step, which is actually adding the rows. You can see that Matthew already has here what we need. So I'm just going to copy all of this text, and let's just paste it here. And in our case, we are calculating the drive and the item ID in a different way because this is kind of a different scenario. So in this case, we are not going to be using the same code for the drive and the item. We are going to be getting the drive ID from here and the item ID from what we just calculated. And then here, we just need to make sure we have the name of the sheet and the name of the table. In our case, we have it correctly, but the table name, we need to get the name that we actually have and put it here. And finally, we just need to add a body of the request. And here we are going to be copying Matthew's example as well. So let's copy this text and paste it here. And here, what we are going to do is just select the result from the CSV. Well, here I made a mistake. That was not what I needed to select. Let's go here and let's do select output. Well, here it's not letting me select the whole thing. So let's do another compose. Let's call it compose array. And then I'm going to copy this and paste it here. And in the values, I will pass the outputs from the select CSV. And now it lets me correctly select it. And then here I can just use the result of the previous compose array. So let's just select it and let's remove this. So now we can save it and test it again, just to see if everything works properly. So let's hit on test manually, and then let's the file and just wait a few seconds. Okay, now it's running. Let's open the execution and let's go back to edit just in case we need to do something else. And here there seems to be an error. We got a 400 result, and it seems like there is some kind of space at the end, like a break line here for some reason. So what I will do is I will switch to the classic designer, because sometimes the new designer is not great at recognizing these kind of hidden characters. And we actually showed it in a previous video as well when that was happening. So let's see if the classic designer will show us the error and let us fix it. Okay, let's go here. And yeah, indeed, there is a hidden row that we were not seeing in the modern designer. So let's just remove that and re-execute, and we'll see. Okay, now it seems like it ran correctly. So let's refresh our folder and let's see the file. We can see that all the rows have been added, and now this is an actual CSV file formatted as a table. And we successfully converted the CSV document into a formatted Excel file. In this scenario, what we used is a combination of the Graph API with out-of-the-box Power Automate actions to transform the CSV. Then to get the information about the file that we want to enter the data into. And finally, using the Graph API and Matthew's approach to enter data into the Excel document. What I really like about this approach is that it's really fast. You can see that it inserted hundreds of rows in just a second. If we would use the add a row into a table, that would for sure take much more longer than that. So I think this approach that Matthew shows in the blog is pretty cool. And it can be used in many scenarios where we are working with Excel and we want it to be faster because the Excel connector is quite weak and slow. So this approach of using the Graph API and the HTTP request is really useful, and I think it's pretty cool. So I hope that this was useful for you, and see you next time.